RT presents Hungarian PM Orban pledges to support Poland against European Inquisition. And this is Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister. Hungary will stand by Poland in a row with the European Union. The country's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, has said, blasting Brussels for its Inquisition offensive against Poland, which has been threatened with sanctions over its controversial judicial reforms plan. The Inquisition offensive against Poland can never succeed because Hungary will use all legal options in the European Union to show solidarity with the Poles, Reuters cited Orban as saying Saturday. Orban's statement of support came as Poland's upper house passed the judiciary reform bill, which, if approved by the president, will enable lawmakers to designate judges to the Supreme Court. Deemed a major blow to the constitution, the proposed new legislation has triggered massive protest across Poland, with thousands expected to rally again Saturday. Poles have urged President Andrzej Duda to reject the bill, while Brussels warned it was very close to triggering Article 7 if there is a clear risk of serious breach of the bloc's values. Article 7 of the Lisbon Treaty may be activated, which, among other measures, would suspend certain of the rights, including Poland's voting rights in the European Council. If adopted, the laws would seriously erode the independence of the Polish judiciary. First Vice President of the European Commission, Franz Timmermans, said. Speaking in Romania, Orban lashed out at Timmermans, referring to him as an inquisitor who steps up against those who speak up. He said Timmermans was involved in an effort to weaken patriotic governments, adding Poland was now his target. Here's a link to a further in-depth article, I would guess, about the ban on the rights of Poles to vote in the European Union should they trigger this Article 7. Last month, the European Commission launched infringement procedures against Budapest, Warsaw and Prague over a breach of their legal obligations under the EU refugee relocation scheme, saying the trio haven't relocated a single person from more than 100,000 stranded in Italy and Greece. Known for his vehement opposition to the EU's migrant policy, Orban remains defiant, claiming that Hungary can't show solidarity with ideas and people whose goal is to change our lives. We can't show solidarity or we will risk losing our identity, Orban said. Will Europe be inhabited by Europeans? Will Hungary be inhabited by Hungarians? Germany by Germans? France by the French? Italy by the Italians? Who will live in Europe? He went on. Viktor Orban is so right, especially with the last things he said. Because the globalists, like I have said 1,000 times in my videos, because I have been quite focused on this globalist scum, they really want to remove our identities, and I also said it in a recent video I recorded, not sure if I'm gonna upload that before this or not, but they are taking away our identities. They're trying to make sure that, well, you don't have an Italian country, you have a global community, and they are trying to say that we all are one human race, and there should be not other races, there should be no other identities. They want to globalize everything, our school systems, our races, our languages, everything. So there's not gonna be any other different people in the world. They don't want diversity, they want no intellectual diversity. They want one world government. And if you look at these globalists and their agendas, they want a world government with collectivism. And that's all true. And if you really check on these politicians, it will really say those things. They want a system that's basically communist for the entirety of the world. Communism and globalism have a lot of things in common, and they play by the same rule book. I know I talked about this in a recent video, but still, this is so related. I just don't know how you can not talk about this, because this is literally what's going on. But people just need to wake up to this. And how you make them wake up to this, I don't know. They're so blindly loyal to the government, so they won't even admit that there's something wrong with destroying your heritage. They want to destroy their heritage. They're so extremely blind, but also that's just the way the media portrays it, because the people like Viktor Orban, those kinds of people in the country are being silenced. And if you look at the political parties, for example in Sweden, almost every political party are left-leaning. There are no right-winged parties, because the only right-wing parties there are in Sweden, there are liberals posing as conservatives. I mean, even the Christian Democrats are left-leaning. And if you look in Germany, who had a recent election with Madame Merkel, she won again. And she's the one who had this open border policy and everything that has been heavily criticized. Tragically, she won again, but she's a Christian Democrat. A Christian Democrat, so they're quite hardcore conservative, right? But she says that Germany, why should it be a country for Germans? Who said that Christianity should be the majority religion in Germany?
Sie haben vorhin auch die Verantwortung von dieser ganzen Geschichte mit den Flüchtlingen angesprochen. Eine der Verantwortungen ist es ja aber auch, uns hier in Europa zu schützen. Und vor allem mit Flüchtlingen aus Syrien und aus diesen Ländern kommen ja noch mehr Leute mit einem islamischen Hintergrund zu uns. Und ich glaube, was der Herr vorhin angesprochen hat, beinhaltet ja auch eine große Angst hier in Europa zu dieser Islamisierung, die immer mehr stattfindet. Wie wollen Sie Europa in dieser Hinsicht und unsere Kultur schützen?
Ich glaube erst einmal, dass der Islamismus und der islamistische Terror leider Erscheinungen sind, die wir ganz stark natürlich in Syrien haben, in Libyen haben, im Norden des Irak haben, aber zu denen leider die Europäische Union eine Vielzahl von Kämpfern beigetragen hat. Und wir können nicht sagen, das ist ein Phänomen, das uns nichts angeht, sondern es sind zum Teil Menschen, oft sehr junge Menschen, die in unseren Ländern aufgewachsen sind und wo wir auch unseren Beitrag leisten. Zweitens, Angst war noch nie ein guter Ratgeber, also es ist im persönlichen Leben nicht und es ist auch im gesellschaftlichen Leben nicht. Kulturen und Gesellschaften, die von Angst geprägt sind, werden mit Sicherheit die Zukunft nicht meistern. Und drittens, wir haben diese Debatte natürlich auch, dass wir sehr viele Muslime in Deutschland haben. Wir haben die Debatte darüber, ob der Islam zu Deutschland gehört. Wenn man 4 Millionen Muslime hat, finde ich, braucht man nicht darüber zu streiten, ob jetzt die Muslime zu Deutschland gehören und der Islam nicht oder ob der Islam auch zu Deutschland gehört. Aber da gibt es auch diese Sorgen und ich muss Ihnen ganz ehrlich sagen, wir haben doch alle Chancen und alle Freiheiten, uns zu unserer Religion, sofern wir sie ausüben und an sie glauben, zu bekennen. Und wenn ich was vermisse, dann ist das nicht, dass ich irgendjemandem vorwerfe, dass er sich zu seinem muslimischen Glauben bekennt, sondern dann haben wir doch auch den Mut zu sagen, dass wir Christen sind, haben wir doch den Mut zu sagen, dass wir da in einen Dialog eintreten. Haben wir doch dann aber auch bitteschön die Tradition, mal wieder in den Gottesdienst zu gehen oder ein bisschen bibelfest zu sein und vielleicht auch mal ein Bild in der Kirche noch erklären zu können. Und wenn Sie mal Aufsätze in Deutschland schreiben lassen, was Pfingsten bedeutet, da würde ich mal sagen, ist es mit der Kenntnis über das christliche Abendland nicht so weit her. Und sich anschließend zu beklagen, dass Muslime sich im Koran besser auskennen, das finde ich irgendwie komisch. Und vielleicht kann uns diese Debatte auch mal wieder dazu führen, dass wir uns mit unseren eigenen Wurzeln befassen und ein bisschen mehr Kenntnis darüber haben. Diese Debatte sehr defensiv. Gegen terroristische Gefahren muss man sich wappnen. Und ansonsten ist die europäische Geschichte so reich an so dramatischen und gruseligen Auseinandersetzungen, dass wir sehr vorsichtig sein sollten, uns sofort zu beklagen, wenn woanders was Schlimmes passiert. Wir müssen angehen dagegen, wir müssen versuchen, das zu bekämpfen. Aber wir haben nun überhaupt keinen Grund auch zu größerem Hochmut, muss ich sagen. Das sage ich jetzt als deutsche Bundeskanzlerin.
She said like it's not Christianity that has to be a majority religion in Germany, that Islam could be as well. But we know what Islam does, but still these globalists are pushing for these things and they're playing by these Islamophobia and blah 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 identity politics and trying to manipulate the nice people to think that, well, these people aren't so bad. But they really are. These other cultures, they are inferior to ours. But no, we have to be overly welcome to them. And like I said before, liberalism is the road to socialism. It's just paving the way for these globalist bastards to take over our lives. They're taking total control. And as these terrorist attacks happen all over Europe, we are just saying, well, let's use more censorship, like Theresa May said. They're gonna censor more right-wing extremists, not talking about the Muslim extremists. Oh, let's censor people. Well, to some extent she does, but she's more adamant talking about the right-winged people, you know, the people that lives in the country that doesn't want to see their country get blown up and taken over by Islam. Those people are most important to censor, and the police goes and arrests those people, not spying on those mosques, preaching and radicalizing people. It's insanity. But that's the truth of Europe. We're shooting ourselves to death. Not the people, but our politicians, those we trust with power. But I can tell you, people are losing more and more faith. But you might wonder, well, why did Merkel win if people are not trusting the government? Well, you see, they have changed the laws that immigrants that comes into the country can vote faster. And well, when you take in millions and millions of people, eventually the old majority won't be a majority anymore. They will become the minority. And there was a guy who asked lots of German people who they voted for, and most of them did not vote for Merkel. And of course this Merkel is gonna be the shining bright light for all these migrants, the mother of all. And of course they're gonna vote for her. They're bringing in their demographics to the country, not creating it from within. So that's the problem now in Germany, is that they can't voice over these immigrants. These immigrants will now be the new majority in the country. They will be the deciding factor. However, the AfD group, or party, or whatever they're called, are quite similar to the Swedish Democrats in Sweden. And they want secure borders, less immigration, and all of those things, which makes them being called right extremists, because they actually have right values, and are being demonized for it. But this is the reality of the situation. The globalists deems everything that goes against their policies as extremists, if not evil. And this disincentivizes people to support right-winged ideas. And Poland have problems with globalists corrupting the country, selling all of their businesses to other countries, companies moving away, because who wants to stand in a country that shoots itself to death? No. Business owners doesn't want to do that, so if they can, they're gonna move out from the country and sell their businesses because they don't simply see the success in the country. But this new government that have been banning people in radio stations throwing out corrupt politicians that have been selling out the country. They are being deemed as dictatorial. As you saw here, EU wants to trigger this Article 7 to ban them from having votes in the European Council. They refuse to take in immigrants because they want to preserve their cultural heritage, and they don't want to become globalized anymore. They don't want to become impoverished, because the globalist plan is also to throw our economics to hell, so we will become a socialist hellhole and beg for money. Just watch 1984 if you don't like to read. You can find the movie in YouTube. Doesn't cost much at all. Just watch that damn movie. It sums the book up pretty well, I might say. And basically that's the kind of world they want to create for us, where we don't have any right to free speech. We can't express our opinions because that will be a thought crime. I mean, George Orwell was a damn prophet, because more and more of these things he mentioned in his book are being seen in our real lives. And it is horrifying. And these people talk about free speech and goodness and blah blah blah. But see where it leads us. It leads us to a more closed society. Not closed in the sense of having global communications, mind you, but having closed intellectual diversity. We can't express our opinions, we can't talk and speak for ourselves, no, because that's gonna be offensive to somebody else. And that shuts down debate, that shuts down democracies. Because eventually we will cry out for socialist government. That's just how it's gonna be. People want to be entitled to having money. People don't want to work for it. And of course, as we take in these immigrants, the people that suffers most in the countries that have problems getting work, they won't be able to get work because the immigrants will be privileged to those works and the welfare systems, etc. And eventually you won't have any welfare. Eventually people will starve, like in Venezuela. They will have to go and eat zoo animals. They will freaking starve to death and rob and pillage people. I mean, it's despicable what will happen. And this have been tested over and over again, and it never succeeds. Yes, yet people are attracted to communism. Yet people are attracted to these globalist crazy ideas because they use these beautiful words like equality and freedom and that everyone is special. And with all these beautiful labels, we're diverse people, we stand in solidarity, yet we're more split than ever. We're so goddamn torn apart from each other, and we all sit in our ghettos in our countries and we are claiming that we're standing in solidarity. It's just pure bullshit. It's just these big city folks that think they're standing in solidarity because they hold a flag of some kind, and some people comes there to join because they're mentally deranged and enslaved. That's why they're coming out to these events. But they're real people living in the country that doesn't actually care about such bullshit. No one wants to listen to them. No one wants to listen to their troubles. How they can't get work because of all these troubles. They don't want to listen to them, how they're getting attacked every day. No one wants to listen to their death threats. No one wants to listen how their cars got burned. No one wants to listen to their suffering. No, because these countries are perfect, because we're multicultural, we're diverse people. That's why nothing is wrong with our countries, and that's why you cannot criticize it, because we're living in a utopia, which is a complete and utter lie. But the Poles, the Hungarians, the Eastern European countries like Serbia, they are tired, they're sick and tired of these globalists, and they actually have the gall to stand up to this, rather than most other Western countries that have fallen to this lie. It's the song of globalism, and it's a song that will bring you only devastation and suffering and poverty. It doesn't want prosperity, it wants austerity. It wants your suffering. It doesn't want people to be happy. It doesn't want people to actually make something for themselves. They want to make people dependent on the governments. That's what it does. That's what it always will do. But they will always come with these lies and indoctrinate people. And as we've seen with Poland here, they have tried really hard to fight against this, but you know, it's only a matter of time before they're gonna fall, because these sanctions, I mean, it's ridiculous. But the European Union have the power to. The best way to counter this globalist threat is to actually leave the European Union and live outside their systems. Try to limit the corruption and to maintain your sovereign right as a country. It's the best way to stand a chance against these globalists. Because what the globalists are now are basically bankers. They're trying to make a privately owned government, a world government. And these people are multi-billionaire super capitalists that owns oil companies and everything, you know, like the Rockefellers in America. I mean, these people are trying to buy up the entirety of the world. That's basically their plan to form their technocracy. But they have done this in secret, but they're getting more and more desperate because people are actually revealing them to the world. Their names are being heard more and more frequently. And this is detrimental to them, because if people are knowing what they're up against, like, oh, it's us against them, then they're gonna lose, because the people will react. That's why they have been in secret, because when they are in secret and they can't be named, etc., well, it's gonna be hard for people to point them out. They can just say it's conspiracy theories and people will sound ludicrous when they talk about this. But when their names are in open, like the Rothschilds, probably the most prominent family, probably the leading group of the globalists, then you're gonna actually have a face of the enemy. You're gonna actually point out, rather than having left and right-wing hysteria, both calling out for a bigger government that will regulate and protect people against these things rather than have actual free societies, then people will see their faces and people will realize, hey, these people want us to fight amongst each other. Hey, these globalist thugs, they actually want us to be pitted against each other in an arena, to fight amongst ourselves, to divide and conquer us. They don't want us to be in solidarity. They want to split us as nations. Nations, meaning that we're countries, meaning that we're one people, meaning that we stand for one and the same things. I mean, here in Europe, we had our homogenic societies, but they have tried to destroy that. They don't want us to be purely Swedish people in Sweden. They don't want Poland to be purely Polish in Poland, and they don't want the British to be purely British, etc., etc. Like Orban said, what will happen with the Germans in Germany? Like, there won't be Germans. They will be part of this world community they're trying to create. Take a note in the words the politicians uses in their world view, how the world should look like. They will use words like a world community. They want a world government with collectivism, like I said before. And they don't want to even see families anymore. They want to see the children belonging more to the communities rather than just the families.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have, because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families, and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
And consider the black neighborhoods and in general throughout the Western world. They're trying to break the family. And what does that make? Yes, it promotes violence and crimes and gangs. And these cities that have most problems with gun crimes, etc., they're controlled by Democrats, in other words, socialists. And what kinds of agendas does these people promote? Of course, socialist ideas of welfare and entitlement, rather for people to actually try and make something out of themselves. They actually will make it more difficult to get jobs. That's something that right-wing people actually misses to talk about, because when you bring in lots of immigrants, when you make people entitled to all of these things, there will be more difficult for people to actually know how to get jobs. It will be less jobs because they have to appropriate jobs to others. And of course the middle income people, you know, the people with basic jobs, they won't be able to get jobs eventually. There will not be room for them. I mean, this craving that our populations have to increase, it's just insanity. And these Democrats are also saying, hey, no, let's not have guns. Let's have no gun violence in our cities. Yet their cities are gonna be the most gun violent cities in the entirety of the countries. Like, look at, for example, at Chicago, Detroit. These countries have been controlled by leftists since decades ago. They're so corrupt, and their corruption have corrupted the city. Like, the people just loses touch with the American ideals and dream and the Constitution. They blame America instead, rather than actually loving their country. They're trying to destroy nationalism and promote this globalistic view that, you know, nations are bad. That's why America is bad for you. Because, yes, America is multi-ethnic, but they still have the same culture, right? They have the same constitution, they have the same law, they have the same things they cherish. They cherish the sports, they cherish their national anthem. That's culture. And same thing here in Europe. We're gonna learn how bad our ancestors were. We're gonna learn how bad Hitler were. But we're not gonna learn about how Hitler was a socialist. And we're not gonna learn how bad the socialist ideals were. We're not gonna read about communism in our schools. At least I didn't do so. I did not even read about my own history here in Sweden. I did not learn about the Swedish history when I was in school. And that's pretty sickening, because what I remember we read about history was mostly like the Second World War. We learned about the French Revolution, we learned some Asian stuff. But what did we really learn about Europe? The Roman Empire. I think that was one of the few things, along with the French Revolution. Most of the stuff was just random stuff from different places in the world, and we're gonna admire them, and we're not gonna talk about the negatives in these countries, because why don't we talk about the negatives in these countries? Why don't we learn how amazing our cultures are? No, because the globalists don't want our kids to learn that. They want us to be indoctrinated that our heritage are evil, and therefore we can only move forward in the direction of saying, hey, well, I hate my country because we had these colonial people and they were Christians, you know, and Christianity is evil because they say they're not supposed to kill people, yet they kill people. Well, if you look at the colonial affairs, first and foremost, it wasn't about religion all that much. It was an expansionist ideas from the governments that the new future was beyond the horizon. The new future would not to be in your countries, and everyone wanted power, right? So what did these countries do? Yes, they colonized because they thought expansion was the new way to move forward in the future. Like, it was the only way to survive. And every country at this time was afraid of other countries of growing so big with their colonies that they would be no match to them, that these empires will rule the world. So it was a great race, like the space race, to move away from your continent. And of course, the inhabitants had to suffer a lot because of this and lose their empires and their entire continents because of foreigners coming in. But that's what's happening to us in modern time. We're being colonized by these Middle Eastern countries and African countries also. And when you listen to the media coverage, they won't even mention their ethnicity. They will try to censor that as much as possible, at least here in Sweden and Germany, because Hitler mentioned the Jews all the time. Well, if it's a Swedish person, let's mention that it's Swedish, not saying yes, oh, it's a man that killed a Pakistani man, because they can say the name of the victim, where he was from, but they have a big problem of saying that it was a Pakistani man that killed him, because they don't want to make people think, oh, the immigrants are committing crimes all the time. So they censor this with the news, which we know is bought up by the globalists. And any media coverage, you're gonna see hateful comments towards a certain group, like white Christians. They are evil, so of course we're gonna hate them on anything they do and say. But whenever an immigrant commits a crime, we're gonna forgive this. I know I've said this 1,000 times, but you know, this is what this entire article is about. The globalists are attacking us, and we're just gonna pretend it doesn't exist. We're just gonna pretend it doesn't affect our lives. We're just gonna pretend that these globalist thugs can come in and roll into our countries and tell us, well, you know, you have to start hating your national anthem. You can't sing that thing anymore. And by the way, when I think about it, in my political update video, so to speak, there's so many news going on, I did also forget not just the German election, but I forgot to mention about the American football players, because before it was only one guy that sat on his knees to protest in the national anthem and say, you know, I'm not gonna stand and sing this song because America is bad, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, he was black, he had afro, and these American football players, they refused to stand and sing the national anthem. This is the big breaking of the globalists, because Trump did denounce them and stuff like that. Like, he didn't want to stand and sing the national anthem. Fire him. That's what he basically said, that the bosses and the CEOs and etc. should take some responsibility and, you know, cast out these unnationalistic peoples. But of course they reacted quite hard on this, and they all tried to start this political commotion where they're gonna stand in protest and say, we don't like this country, we're not gonna sing, we're not gonna do this, we're not gonna stand and hold our hands on our hearts. And one guy that's shown as a hero that actually stood there and sang with his hand on his heart, he was shooed out by his boss, and then he later came out and apologized like a wuss. I mean, like really. That's probably because he's afraid to lose his $22 million contract and his money he have earned, because he's under contract and he's gonna be brainwashed to say these things. It's pathetic. And all of the coaches, all of these people that works with these football players, they also stand there and demonstrate against the national anthem. But the people have actually been angered by this. They are losing their ratings. The people are actually burning their shirts and stuff like that. You know, like you buy shirts of a certain player and you have their number on them. They burn stuff like that. All kinds of merchandise they have bought, because they're so outraged by their defiance against their own country, against their veterans that have sacrificed their lives in the wars. But this is what globalism does. It divides people. It says, you know, your country is bad, you should hate it. You should hate all of these wars because your people are evil and have created these wars because your racist heritage demanded it. You know, that's what they're gonna say, but it's not true. In fact, it's the globalist that wants the wars all the time. I mean, look in the Syria conflict. Who was the ones crying out for war? Yes, it was the neocons that are globalists. It was Hillary Clinton that is an obvious globalist. And it was many others. I mean, the names that supported this was endless. The American politicians are so extremely corrupt. But thankfully, Donald J. Trump actually withdrew from that conflict. But this is what globalism does. It promotes these wars to destabilize these countries, and then we're gonna flush in these people from the Middle East. It's all connected. It's just a process. I've said this 1,000 times. But this is true. And he was protesting for these Black Lives Matter because, well, they claim that police shoot black victims more than white people, etc. But that have also been proven to be false because police officers, even black police officers, said that it's no point going into these neighborhoods where they're being dissented, hated, like in Chicago, the worst areas, because they're gonna risk getting shot. And these police officers, they don't want to do that. So they fail in their job. They're not treating people equally under the law of jurisdiction, etc., because they don't want to enforce the law and risk getting killed by people just saying, hey, cops are bad, shoot the fucking cops, fuck the police, you know, like the rapper songs. And they're gonna sit and be indoctrinated by the rap songs and become violent. I mean, listen to rap music for an entire day and see how your mood is gonna be. You're gonna be more violent. You're gonna be more cocky. You're gonna feel like, yeah, I'm empowered, you know? These motherfucking police ain't got nothing on me. I'm a motherfucking gangster, you know? And this invokes violence. It's indoctrination. If you listen to something 1,000 times, it will get into your head. I know it might sound like I'm a cult leader preaching about the evils of globalism, but I'm trying to explain and just make people understand, because each time I go out to the internet and see people talk about globalism, they are like, it's a conspiracy theory. No one cares about your racist. Like, they're so brainwashed, they can't even see what's going on. So basically what I'm trying to do here is, I know I'm preaching to the choir if it's the same people listening. They're most likely gonna know it, and it's gonna be antagonizing for them to listen to this all the time. But people that haven't, well, it's gonna be perhaps an eye-opener, or perhaps they have already left because, well, this is offensive, I can't listen to these races, and they're gonna flag the video and dislike and leave an angry comment. Not that it happens too much on my videos, because I barely get any viewers, but you get my point. It's something that you have to try and tell people. And I'm gonna try and tell it in different ways and try to help explain people why this is so important to understand. And I'm not talking like I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist that I just believe that this is a funny theory and I go with it because, you know, I want to sound crazy with a tinfoil hat on my head. No, I say this because this is a conspiracy realist. This is a real thing. And if you look at history, conspiracies, it's not just a made up thing like they have in movies to make the plot seem more interesting. It's an actual thing that have been going on for thousands of years. That's how countries gets their politicians overthrown in democratic elections. That's how politicians get assassinated and others rises to power. Like Saddam Hussein. He committed a conspiracy and attacked the government and took power. Saddam Hussein did that. Hitler also committed conspiracy plans to take over his Germany, to make it his Nazi Germany. He planned this to become a Führer. And I mean, Erdogan has also planned for many years to take his Turkey into his Ottoman Empire. I mean, these things have been planned since long time before. And these globalists are committing a conspiracy on a global level. And I mean, these things have been going on since ancient times. Just look at crazy people from the Roman Empire, like Julius Caesar. He was stabbed to death. And Shaka was also killed by his own people because they wanted a crown. Oh, well, I don't know if they have crown because they actually have cow hides and feathers. That's the Zulu, if you don't know who Shaka is. And this is just historical. Just read books. Just read about world leaders who have been overthrown. And it is because of conspiracies. And that's why this is not just some conspiracy theory. It's actually in effect. The evidence is out there, yet people don't want to listen to it because they're being thrown off the trail because some person have labeled it as being fake news. No, it's just a conspiracy theory. No, it's not a conspiracy theory, you fool. This is actually going on. And they even says it in their own doctrines. Like I said, they want a world government with collectivism. Read what collectivism is and see how well that went for the Ukrainians, where 7 to 10 million starved to death. See how collectivism worked in communist China, where 65 million died. Just look up these numbers, just look up these things I mentioned in my videos. I mean, it's not like I come with made-up facts. I mean, of course, I'm gonna try and be certain to make sure that you're gonna know, or try and make it clear for you to understand when I talk about my opinions, what my thoughts are with things, and what the facts are, and what history is. I try to make this clear, but it might be unclear for certain people. But if you actually take your time and like, yeah, this sounded interesting what he talked about, and look up like one thing every time you watch a video like this, you're gonna learn so much more. And eventually, even though you're gonna be a complete newbie and have never heard about these things before, eventually your knowledge will be comprehensible to these terms. I remember when I first started to listen to politics intensely, I mean, I was like, what the hell are they talking about? And if you're gonna listen to a guy like Donald Trump, you're gonna know why he won the election, because he's gonna not talk some wizard language where no one understands, like Latin, and the priests only knew that during the Roman times, and people are gonna be like, what are these priests actually saying? You know, this is why he won partially, because he spoke out to the people rather than being this, yeah, I'm gonna be this super politician with super nice words. I like sophisticated language. But you see, if I'm, for example, trained to be an assassin, or trained to be a builder, a carpenter, or, you know, a physician, I'm most likely not gonna be attuned as much to politics. I'm most likely not gonna have the time to study politics as much if I have a different profession, if I have a family, if I have a life. I'm most likely gonna be the 99% that, or 98%, or whatever you wish to say, that actually just looks out after themselves. Then you're gonna have the one and the other 1% fighting over power. And once that 1% comes to power, the other 98% will say, yeah, we have always been following you, we have always believed in your cause, you know, we're citizens of your whatever, of their sovereign nation, of their world government, or whatever they're gonna say they are. But that's how things goes. But the most important thing to note is that people have always held the power to stand against tyrants. You alone can make the change. You, with all of your millions of brethren all across the globe, if people stand up to their governments will be powerless. If the people will voice out and not be cast down by the government, well, then the people will win. If the people tries to overthrow the government, they will succeed. Not that I'm saying all of these things are necessarily a good thing, always to resort to violence and things like that, but I'm just telling you, the will of the people, their determination, is what have caused for our societies to develop the way they have. The politicians have to go with the flow. They will entice ideas when it's appropriate, and they will withdraw with their ideas when they see they are not appropriate enough. Because if they would see that, oh yeah, we can't push this socialist agenda yet, then they're gonna push for other things that will help promote their socialist agendas for the future. So you see, these politicians, they always know what they're doing. They know their plots, they know their moves. Just listen to politicians talk about political events, etc. They always talk with such precision that he made this decision to appeal to the people as a good man, etc. And once he had the people's trust, he completely withdrew. Of course, there was splits within the government, but still he had supporters, a huge follower base, and they followed him through these dark deeds he put in place. I mean, these things happens all the time. Just listen to politicians talking about their leaders. Just listen to people talking about historic leaders. They will always talk about how they appeal to the people and how they push their agendas forward and how they used wars for their political agendas. There have always been talks about power and wealth amongst these people and control. And one good way to trace how these globalists operates, just go and trace the money, follow the money wherever it came from. For example, if you suspect that Antifa would be sponsored by George Soros or something like that, you know, these has to be sponsored by globalists stuff and like that. Well, check the companies that have donated monies and things like that, and see who their founders was, etc. You know, do a thorough study, and you're gonna see that these people that supports these globalist ideas are gonna be sponsored directly by globalist puppets. That's how it is, that's how it always gonna be. But people are so blind to these things. But the question remains, how long will it take before Hungary and Poland and all these countries will fall to the EU's demands that they should import people and destroy their culture altogether? How should the future of Europe look like? I mean, will the European people be able to stand against this? And will the European people be able to say, hey, we don't want globalism, get the hell out of our countries, you freaking traitors? Or will we succumb to this 1984 dystopia where we will just bow to the government? So let's read the comments. Let's see if we can see some Poles or some other nationalistic people saying something. Or will we find some liberal hysteria against this act of racism? As they would claim it to be, of course. Carlos A. Perez. So, when Poland finally gives up, they will receive thousands and thousands of Muslims, refugee/migrants, from your supposedly beloved EU brothers. Then perhaps you will start to appreciate Russia. Yeah, I think they appreciate themselves, but yeah, Russia has a good idea of trying to preserve their culture. I mean, Putin is working hard to preserve his ethnicity, etc. in the regions. And also, once they're gonna adopt these Muslims, they're gonna see terrorist attacks. And how many terrorist attacks have there been in Poland, in Hungary, in Serbia, etc.? Pretty much zero from what I remember, because they don't take in those people. Carlitos Way. Wave Russia. You know Russia has dozens of millions of Muslims. Moscow is the greatest Muslim city in Europe. More than 3 million Muslims live in Moscow. The greatest mosque in Europe was inaugurated last year by Vlad himself and Erdogan. I don't know exactly of the Moscow situation with Muslims, though I know it's majority Muslims, and I mean Eastern Orthodox and atheists because of communism, and where the majority of the Muslims live in Russia is actually in the southern areas north of Turkey, in the Chechnya, Dagestan regions, those areas, not in actual northern hemisphere of Russia and northeastern in the Siberian region. Mr. Lead B1. Yes, but unlike the EU, in Russia, Islam and other religions know not to raise their head too high, or the state will smack it down, and rightly so. Not completely true, actually. You know, Chechenians does consider Sharia law to be more important than the Russian constitution. So I think you better check into that. Dersu. Not yet, but demographics are on the Muslim sides in Russia, more so even than in the rest of Europe. Not sure about that either. I think Putin is actually trying to resist this, even though he speaks out for them and are trying to protect his Muslim people, like we're a multicultural country, etc. You know, he also has this rhetoric because it is a very multicultural country, because it's a very big and vast country. But I do think he tries to keep it from state to state, rather than having, yeah, let's mix everyone. Like, here's Muslims, here's more Christian Orthodox, etc. Carlos A. Perez, I think it's the same guy again. Beautiful, but Poland wanted to be in the EU, expecting a total new era of prosperity. Now, here you have it. Accept the refugees, migrants, that will destroy your culture and your people. What a prosperity. I think this guy is sort of trying to antagonize people and make people realize how stupid this is. But he has a point. But I don't think Poland joined the EU just for the economic prosperity. I think they could create that on their own hand. But I think the main reason why they would join the European Union is because of their history. You know, the Polish people have been prosecuted for a long time. They have been attacked by the German people in the past, the Persian Empire, and they were completely conquered. They had no lands. They had no Poland on the map for over 100 years. And after the First World War, they regained their home country. And in the Second World War, their country was split again. So I think the reason Poland was in this European Union to begin with was to seek security for their nation. They wanted to be able to protect their nation and also have some economic prosperity, because they thought this union was not going to be the Soviet Union, but an actual libertarian one that would protect them. But it turns out to be a farce, a globalist farce. Poland demanded it, and still demands free movement for 100 million or so of its junkies, thieves, and fraudsters spread around the EU. Poland having migrants whether it wants them or not. Hungary should just mind its own affairs. Yeah, there's lots of Polish people actually moving to other countries as cheap laborers and also making really fraudulent affairs where they're actually going to say, yeah, I make the best carpentry work, and everything is going to be done so extremely against the rules in the countries, and people are risking of getting homeless and losing their children because of social services deeming their houses so ineligible to live in. It's devastating to see, but lots of these people are actually Polish that commits these fraudulent works. And also, some people are just seeking prosperity, because I remember one guy working for 8 Swedish crowns a day. I think it was a day in Poland, and he was doing dishes. So he was gonna try and move to Great Britain. I never heard from him after that, but you know, I understand when a country becomes so devastated, you just don't feel like you have a chance to live in that country. But still, I, as a nationalist, I who is an identitarian, or whatever people like to identify these people as, I don't believe that if you moved from a country, you're gonna make the situation better. It's better to stay in your country and try to make your country better. But I understand the desperate situation and people that doesn't care about their country too much and just care about having a good life for themselves and actually having a family that they can support. If actual future, worth life living. That's why lots of people went to America, because they wanted the American dream, right? And that's also what's happening with these African migrants. Lots of them just hears that, oh, we can get social benefits from these European countries without actually working. So that's why they're moving over here. But yes, I understand this guy's frustration against the Poles. Stephen Churchill, by the way, his name was BW. Maybe it stands for by the way. Stephen Churchill, in Hungary, our women can walk the streets in safety at night. And that's the way it's going to stay. Damn right. And I wish we could say the same in Sweden. It's becoming more and more dangerous to actually move freely here, especially in the Sharia zones. I mean, some people are so afraid they don't even dare step outside even during the day because they're afraid of getting harassed and raped. Free Saxon, right on. Please keep it that way. Yep, I hope so too. And please help the other European countries understand how much better your countries are. Because by being the example, the Hungary, Poland, etc. could be for the rest of these Western countries that are collapsing because of this immigration crisis. Please show how much greater your countries are. Show why your culture is superior. Show why we should have our own cultures and respect our own people and our ethnic people and our own values. George Manoui, in first picture, is Klaus Iohannis, Romanian president and not Hungarian PM. I think that was actually Viktor Orban. Perhaps they edited it, but yeah, I don't know. It couldn't be more fake. It shows a creeper instead of Orban. Well, I guess I was wrong then. What is this? Mad Max. Yep. He's the Romanian creeper who sold out to NATO and plans to buy 3.9 million of Patriot missiles while millions of his citizens live in poverty. I hope Orban washed his hands after the meeting. Correction, 3.9 billion by Mad Max. Wow. But this is Viktor Orban. Did they mean this guy? Isn't that Orban Viktor as well? Well, I don't know what they're talking about, but sure, whatever. Perhaps they edited the pictures or something, because they can do that to article at times. But anyways, sort of a repetitive thing. I'm sorry for that if you watch through the entire thing. But I think it's such an important subject, and, well, this article sort of delivered me right into that, right? So I blame the article for making myself repeat. But hopefully, even though you have listened to this before, it have given you some new knowledge of things, and actually, perhaps, hopefully, will make you realize how important your culture is compared to all these others, and how damaging this multicultural and whatever they're trying to enforce upon our countries. Because it's better when it is from state to state, a world of states, rather than having a world of one government. Because you know what imperialism does. Imperialism ultimately destroys the minorities, because they want to normalize everything. Just look at Soviet Russia. That's the perfect example of imperialism, or communist China. But this, in essence, is what globalism is going to bring you. Lots of suffering. But in the meanwhile, this is where I get off.